One of those things that we've learned along the way is sometimes like knowing where our roles are or where our strengths lie. And Kyle was always like this great visionary.
There is nothing more empowering than jamming your own calendar to the gills and knowing that you are the one who did it. One of the biggest challenges entering truly into this entrepreneurial world was that I have this primal question of like, am I secure?
All right, so Kyle and John, really great to have you guys here. And it's been awesome to connect with you guys. I know I got the opportunity to be on your podcast a little bit earlier. Great to hear a little bit about you guys and what you're up to, which is incredible. But what I didn't get to hear was a little bit more about the background of how you guys got started. I have some context for how this is an interesting story. So I don't know which one of you wants to jump in and start that conversation, but I'd love for you to share with our audience how you got to where you are today.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having us there, Bob. I'll run with it first here. And ultimately, we are entrepreneurs through and through, but we did not start that way. Our podcast was originally branded The Invested Teachers because yes, we went to school to become teachers, high school math teachers, and we spent quite a bit of time in the classroom. And actually, I feel like we took an entrepreneurial approach, even though at the time we didn't realize it, but we were trying to figure out, like, if you think about this, Bob, I know in your backstory you shared with us on our podcast was that you actually were going through and you were planning to become a teacher. So maybe you can relate. We came out as math geeks, math teachers, and John and I didn't know each other at the time. He was in a different school district near, out in Chatham area. I was in the Windsor, Essex area. And we both had very similar experiences after we met later in life, in that we came into the classroom, we just sort of thought that everyone was going to like math. I don't know if you've ever been in a math classroom.
Big assumption, yeah.
Exactly. I'm like, how stupid am I? Like, why did I think that kids were going to actually enjoy this? So we spent a lot of time and we sort of had to, face ourselves in the mirror and kind of look at ourselves and say, like, we can like keep trying to do this over and over again, try to do it the same way that it was done back when we were in school and it worked for us. We'll call it, semi-sorta, and just have to deal with the fact that like more than half of our students don't want to be there, are visibly not enjoying the experience. And we're going to have to do this for 30 years. So we sort of took this entrepreneurial path in education to try to do that better and actually had some success, then began sharing it through our consulting business in the education space. And, at the same time started building a real estate portfolio. And at some point we sort of recognized that, oh my gosh, we're actually not math teachers. We're entrepreneurs. Like, what are we doing in here? And we loved the process, but ultimately fast forward, a couple decades later and here we are in the business world, just like you are.
Yeah. John, what was missed in that story?
I think Kyle, you covered it pretty quickly there. It was kind of like, hey, this is exactly the way we did it. I don't think I need to really embellish, all the little stories along the way. But I think Kyle kind of recognized early on that we were like building something, and I think, and he kind of like tugged me along, grabbed me by the shirt collars and said, like, I think we're going here. And I think it was like a vision that he's always had. We always kid ourselves. So we've been learners along the way for business for years now, and because we've been doing the entrepreneurial thing in the math space, so the math teacher space, like training math teachers for over 10 years. So, and like we had built that up over that time, and what Kyle said, it kind of led into like, where are we going to put some of these funds that we now have? Like, we put them in real estate. We're going to do this with this. And how do we manage our money? This is where we are now, and how we are teaching that to other people. But I think we've always been lifelong learners, and one of those things that we've learned along the way is sometimes like knowing where our roles are or where our strengths lie. And Kyle was always like this great visionary. So like, if you think about Gino Wickman and traction and rocket fuel, with the outline between, the visionary and the integrator, it was kind of like Kyle said, we didn't really know each other before math education, and we kind of discovered, hey, you're doing that, I'm doing this. Why don't we team up and do some of these things together? And it really was like a natural fit where he's a visionary, but I relished in the day-to-day, the details. Let's get this done. Let's work on this project. Let's check this off the list, where he's the big thinker going like, we're going in this direction, but I don't want to do all of this stuff. And I don't really want to know what's all this stuff, and it's like, okay, we'll make sure we get this done. So it's like that part of our partnership has been, strengthened along the way, because it wasn't until I think we read Rocket Fuel, we're like, this is describing us. And we didn't know that this is like what good business partnerships look like in other instances. And it was like, I can't even believe that like we were lucky enough to like have two people. Like I can imagine that if we were both visionaries or both integrators, we wouldn't be here, right? Like it's just the structure of the way, our two personalities have jived together over the years.
Well, and you wouldn't need each other as much, for that compliment. Rocket Fuel is probably the highest recommended book that I give out, because most of the time I'm dealing with the visionary who's going, oh my God, I need to find the person who can help support me. And I go, read the book.
I've got all these ideas I never wrote down.
Yeah, and that's interesting. We, our theme for the year in our company is the boring year, because I needed that to be a theme so that everyone thought I wasn't going to continue to blow things up all the time. So yeah, and they're all in denial. They're like, we're waiting for the boring year to just absolutely turn into chaos.
Yeah. When's the shoe drop?
Yeah, exactly. You know what though, guys? Like, interesting path to get here, fairly unique for you guys. I would say, man, were those kids ever lucky to get you into their classrooms for the period of time that you were in there. Because wow, would I have ever loved any of the teachers in, the public school system to be able to embrace entrepreneurship and to even have that, as part of a vision for yourselves, or a feeling, or, even the outside of school system. I just never had that. And it's so awesome. I'm sure you guys have had such a dramatic impact on so many students' lives. So kudos to you guys for being in that space, but to also finding yourself, because there's a lot of times where people just never really find their passion of what it is that they really want to pursue, that sort of, the spirit of their soul that drives, their purpose for a lifetime. So congratulations on finding that path, even though you went at it an indirect route. But question for you guys, like, because of that transition, what were some of the challenges that you found going from, a unionized government organization with very sort of rigid times? Here's where you show up, here's where you go home, this is kind of where you need to be at all those times, to moving into entrepreneurship. Let's talk about some of the challenging things as part of that transition.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, absolutely. I think, the structure, and I'm guessing here, I'm going to put words in John's mouth, but I'm guessing like John loves structure, right? So he was probably like, the bell is going to go off at 8:17. And like, he probably loved that aspect of it. And to be honest, some parts of that are really helpful, because you don't have to think, you get up at the same time, you do the same routines, you get out the door, you go do your thing. But I will tell you, there is nothing more empowering than jamming your own calendar to the gills and knowing that you are the one who did it, So like all these people say, like, it looks like you're working harder now than you used to work when you were, in education, like doing that sort of work. And I'm like, 100% I am, but it's empowered, like feeling empowered to be able to decide that, hey, Bob, we're going to record right now at this time because it's our agenda. There's something really empowering about it. But I will say, for me, one of the biggest challenges entering truly into this entrepreneurial world was that I have this primal question of like, am I secure? And if you've read the book, seven primal questions, I think it's called, everyone has at least a main primal question. And for me, it's about financial security. Whether it's how I was raised, whether it was something that happened. My mom dropped me when I was a baby. I don't know why, but it's like, for whatever reason, I want to always make sure that, like, without a shadow of a doubt, that financially, that my life, my family is secure. So it made it extremely difficult for me to even consider stepping away, knowing that we had a really successful thing already happening, because we like to call it, it's like cutting the golden handcuffs and saying like, you're going from T4, knowing exactly what you're getting. In the teacher world, it was like knowing that you were getting a raise for the first 10 years. You start really low, but knowing next year's better, and that there's this wonderful golden pension down the road. That's a really like that really comforts a guy who's got a primal question like, am I secure? So that was a big, big leap of, I don't want to say faith, but just more or less having to overcome that fear, which, having done it and looking back at it and going like, holy smokes, I can't believe that I allowed that sort of essentially hinder my potential, given that, we had been doing business for so long.
For sure.
And I think for me, I think a piece of the challenge of moving from teaching all day long, and then moving into this world and being an entrepreneur and working on your business full time. And Kyle, you're right. Like structuring your day is one of those benefits, and thinking about that is really empowering. But for me, I think that one of the huge challenges was, and it still is like, I think we talked about a little bit about this on our podcast with you, Bob, is kind of the identity, like how we've self-identified in the past and in grappling with that identity. Like I was a high school math teacher for 19 years. And, those last 10, we were doing both things at the same time. So we were still I was still in the classroom. Kyle was still in his role as a consultant in his district. And in the side hustle, we're building the consultation business. We're building this business where we're providing wealth management, wealth architecture. And it was for me like officially stepping away from being a teacher, because we've now done that. Like it's kind of like, there it goes. The handcuffs are off. There's no going, well, I guess there could be going back, but it's like, there's no going back now. Right. And it's like, I think for me, it was a struggle to be like, I'm no longer a math teacher. I'm something different. What am I? Like, what it is my identity. It's been so long tied up in that world. And my father is a math teacher, and I've just grown up in that world the whole time, and going like, this is what I was going to do. I was going to be a math teacher. I'm a math teacher. And just realizing that it's like, that's not, I'm a business owner. I'm an entrepreneur. And sometimes that sounds scary. And it was like, for me, just grappling with this reality that I'm not this math teacher anymore. And is that okay? Is that okay? Because I think a lot of us kind of like have to make that leap. Like I know that your history was like, you kind of went into being an entrepreneur right away. And for us, it wasn't. And I think there's a lot of people who are become business owners, especially if you're the side hustle person, be like, I now moved into this, like, this is now my full-time role. I wonder if other people are also kind of grappling with like this identity kind of issue.
Let me ask you this, John, because you had a family, and I don't know what your mom did as well, but dad as a teacher, was there ever, this pressure from family, like how would you give this up, and that's and I only bring this up, and I don't know the answer, but I bring this up because I see that often, right? Where sociology, I didn't enjoy it when I was in school, but man, I've learned a lot about it post-education, about generational shifts. And when we've grown up in a particular way, it becomes really challenging to break out of that mold, especially when your parents have had a fairly successful life and lived a good life, and now all of a sudden it's, so why do you think that wasn't good enough for you, and challenging. So love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, for sure. We've talked about this on our podcast too, because I think even though it's only been a year that I made this shift, right? And so like I said, we were doing 10 years with doing both at the same time. I think it was easier because I did grapple with this, like, you have to like now justify your choice to someone else. It feels like, oh, I have to tell my dad that I'm not going to have this pension that he has, and I have to like move to something else. Kyle and I have been kind of, planning our financial futures for a long time now. And I've deviated from my parents' pathway and their parents' pathways. And, all of our friends are teachers. And it's like, we deviated from that pathway when we went down the whole real estate route, and start to invest in different things and start to kind of like manage my money differently along the way. That part itself a long time ago was not the norm. And explaining that to my parents, it was an early piece that it was in small chunks. So it wasn't like a major shift in that to explain or justify. It was like, probably to them, it felt like a natural progression. They could see the writing on the wall that, this was probably coming. I still think that they don't understand, anything that I do and how it's legal to make money, without having a full-time job and a T4 job and having a pension. Like, what do you mean? Like, is that illegal? Are you allowed to do that? Are you allowed to like charge people money for, what you do? So it was, I think it's a small progressions along the way for me.
And Kyle, different question for you, but as part of this evolution, I know for me, especially when I was early on, we talked about identity here a little bit, but I had this element of imposter syndrome that hit me where it was like, who do you think you are in doing this? And I know for me, I've always, preached this, and I believe in this strongly, getting in rooms where there's so many people that you can learn from their experiences. And I know very early on, I was pushing the status of rooms I was in and really hadn't accomplished anything and had massive imposter syndrome as part of that. Did you have any of that at all?
Well, you know what? I think every educator, so anyone, if you're an educator, it's probably more side hustlers or people that have moved on from education and into entrepreneurship listening to this podcast. But every teacher who walks into a classroom, especially on the first day of school, is an imposter, because it's like you walked in and supposedly you know how to teach. And the reality is when you go to school, like, they don't teach you how to be an effective teacher. They don't teach you how to be an effective speaker. They don't, teach you how to, actually engage someone, not just behaviorally, meaning like, get the strap out and, do this walking around the room. So
Wait, what year did you teach it?
Yeah. How long ago did you start, Kyle? Jeez.
I'm old. What do you want? But it's like truly cognitively engaging, right? Like for learning. And that was something that along the way, we sort of like figured that out. And by figured it out, you never figure it out. You're just further along that journey. And, and then we got into, keynoting in the education space. And we got, so it was like every opportunity that we had along this journey was essentially overcoming, just kind of like what you're describing, like was giving us an opportunity to overcome that imposter syndrome, because we were going to go in front of a bigger room to talk in front of. And I think the scariest part is when you're talking in front of a room where you don't know everyone in the room. So you're like, there must be someone in here who has more experience than what we have. But it's overcoming that and saying, you know what, I'm going to share what I can share. And I'm also not going to pretend that we have all the answers, but we're going to share what did work for us and how you might be able to apply it yourself. And we've sort of carried that philosophy and that learning along with us into our businesses over, this past decade. And we continue to do it now, even in the, corporate wealth management side of things, where, I think people are a little shocked. They get on a call and, we're actually trying to help teach them something. And we're not there to, sort of sell them something or to, force them down a rabbit hole. It's just helping. And I think through that entire path along the way, you start to recognize that as long as you're vulnerable enough, and as long as you're not there trying to exude a significant amount of confidence, you need confidence to be vulnerable. So don't get me wrong on that, but it's like you're not there trying to pretend and trying to, sort of sell this idea like you know more than the person that you're chatting with. All the other things kind of fall into place, and you start to recognize that, you know what? I'm not I'm not faking it. I'm actually coming to this from where I am, and I'm going to do my best to help that person on the other end of the line. And ultimately, I think the most successful business owners out there, the most successful entrepreneurs, figure out those pieces along the way and different parts in the journey.
Mm-hmm. It is challenging. I know I've been in front of a couple fairly large audiences going, what am I doing here? But knowing, right, that you've got some form of wisdom to share, and what you have, people are wanting to hear that's why you're in that space. It is challenging, and it, for me, with a lot of entrepreneurs, it's like, man, putting yourself in positions where you need to grow and you need to fail and you need to be challenged, it's a wonderful opportunity and experience on the entrepreneurial journey. I want to ask you guys this. So obviously we've talked about a transition out of education. Fill me in. What are you guys up to right now?
We're kind of doing two things. One thing a little bit more than the other, but we still, we're running multiple businesses and strengthening those businesses. So one arm of the business is continually, and this is where we're kind of adding to our wealth in that the revenue generated from one business kind of spills into adding to other assets that we have. So in one arm, I'm doing a lot of the heavy lifting in consultation in math, the math land. We are consulting with math leaders in their math programming and how do we shape that and how do we help them, get better results in math class? How do we teach math more effectively? So that's one arm. Kyle is handling, he's living in his expertise, which is, thinking about corporate wealth management and doing what he just said. He's teaching people along the way of like what has worked for us. What strategies are we using to build our wealth and think about our futures and safeguard our loved ones and safeguard our assets. We always kind of think about how we want to build wealth, but a lot of time we're trying to think about that, but at the same time is how do we kind of protect the capital that we've got already? Like how do we not only do one, but make sure we do the other at the same time? Because I think that can be a risk. We just recently, Kyle and I were kind of brainstorming of like, a lot of times it's like we continually add to this, like, think of it as like this house that we're adding to is like, let's add an asset. But how can we add an asset, but at the same time, bring the cement or the foundation up so that at no time does that cement kind of ever go lower? It's like that can't crash down, because a lot of times it's like, let's buy an asset. Let's just pick this, we got some extra funds. Let's put it over here and let's put it maybe in index funds, or let's put it in the stock market. It's like, well, there's some level of risk over there, but can we put it somewhere that actually builds this foundation up so that we add to that foundation, but it allows us to, get into those assets. So we're doing a lot of assisting, teaching, learning along the way, and kind of looking at those two arms. Kyle?
Yeah, no, I think you did a great job there. And I think ultimately at the end of the day, I think, who we tend to serve most, or at least who I'm serving most in the corporate wealth management side, is business owners. Because, much like yourself, Bob, like people have their head down, and sometimes you have to kind of be forced to like lift your head up a little bit and go, like we're doing really well here. But like, what's really happening? Like what is happening on the taxation side? Have we done that effectively? On our podcast, Bob, you were talking about some of the things that frustrate you when, there's this confusion about whether a corporation should be opened or not be opened. And, there's all of those things going on. And for a business owner, they're going like, I know my queen bee role. A lot of people don't articulate it as such, but their queen bee role is doing what they do in their business to generate more revenue and more income. But then after that, a lot of times there's not a lot of, attention paid to like what's happening. A lot of people assume that every dollar that comes in the door actively in the company is taxed at, 12.2%, right? Here in Ontario, or, slightly varying rates in different provinces. But then what happens after that? Should I be taking that money out? Should I be draining the corporation because, that's what I thought I was supposed to do? Should I let it sit in there? Does it go under the mattress? Like, what do I do? And how do I find, I guess, the right fit for me so that I can maximize my wealth in order to help me achieve my actual goal, like the dream outcome that I have for my family and my future? And that's really a lot of the, sort of the thinking that we help business owners do. And we do it in conjunction with amazing folks like the accountants, for example, or like their financial advisors who are involved as well. And we just try to help them with strategy and, of course, implementing tools that might help them further along to preserve wealth, but then also ensure that they're not gifting too much to, that little place we call the CRA.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, nobody wants to give any there. Interesting. It sounds like you've maybe listened to Mike Michalowicz's All In book as well, with a couple of references there. So great book, like that as well. And actually, the CEO of their program is coming in and coming on the podcast as well in the next coming weeks. So so excited for that too. But exciting to hear this, guys, and the evolution. Obviously, it's been happening for 10 plus years, but to be, both feet in at this point, would love to hear. I know it kind of started with the real estate investment side with you guys, from what I understand. So love to understand maybe what that journey has looked like and how you've started to build up a real estate portfolio.
Yeah, I love it. I guess I'll start there because I sort of, as John mentioned earlier, alluded to, I sort of dragged him along, because John was very, in the same mindset as his dad, right?
I'm his first student.
Yeah, exactly. So early in this process, as we started our active business, I was sort of like, so, what you going to do? With this extra money?
I wanted to spend my money. I wanted to spend it.
Casino Windsor. No.
New car coming my way. I needed an education first.
Yeah, he needed a frugal guy like me to say, no, you're not doing that. You're going to do some of this stuff. So for myself, even I remember telling my mom when I was, 17, somewhere around there before university, saying like, hey, I want to buy this property. I didn't know it was called, investment, properties or anything. I was just like, I want to rent it. I had a buddy whose dad had a rental property. I was intrigued by this idea. Never did any of that. Went to university, came back to it, started teaching. And it was as I was aggressively paying down my mortgage, because that's what you're supposed to do, right? That's what John's dad said to do. And that's what my parents did. I'm aggressively paying down this mortgage. And then I start reading a book on a vacation. Now, the only time I ever read a real book instead of listening to it is when I'm stuck on a beach somewhere and I have nothing else to do. So I'm like, all right, I read this book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I'm like, I'm the poor dad in the book. I'm the teacher in the book. It's an actual teacher who is essentially doing exactly what I was doing. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm having an epiphany here, right? So all of a sudden, I kind of reframe my mind, and just so happens that we were coming off the back of, the 2008 financial crisis, and I started looking in the US, and that's sort of where I began the journey. This was before I even knew John. So I was a teacher. I was trying to figure out math education, and I was buying real estate at the same time. That's sort of how we began that journey. And then eventually had families, started this active business, and I didn't have time to research outside of the area. So we started buying properties locally here in Windsor, Essex. So that's kind of primarily where our portfolio lies now. We would call ourselves primarily real estate investors simply because, I'm that, secure guy. I'm like, is that company going to be there or not next year? I don't know in the stock market, but I do know that there will be a door I can go knock on that I own. It just might have a roof that, caved in or whatever I need to do to fix it up along the way.
Yeah. And so what have been maybe some of the challenges with the real estate portfolio and building it up? Because I know I mentioned to you guys earlier, I have a real estate portfolio as well. And all of those investments do not involve any of my time or attention. And that's the way that fits me because, I don't know. I'm not built to be a landlord. I don't want to have those conversations. I don't want to be on call. I'm too involved in other things that's just not my thing. What has worked for you guys in building real estate and maybe what hasn't?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I want to be the person that kind of doesn't get the call. It's I'm here. I've bought this property, but I don't have to do the managing. And I think where the struggles along the way is the learning curve that's needed. It's because it's when you get into real estate investing, do I have to be the landlord or how do I assemble my team? Because having the right team is the make or break, because it'll allow you to become, this person, like you're saying, Bob, is I don't have to really think about it. I don't have to think about it in the nighttime. I know I'm not going to get a call. I just get the check in the mail, or I make a couple decisions. But where the struggle, I think, for us is we early made that team. And I know that, Kyle, I think for a little bit, you managed your own properties. You had had 3 guys that were also as kind of partners along the way that had their own specialties. So that made a lot of sense. But where the struggle ended up, I think, being was really kind of teaching the project, the property managers on how to be property managers. Like there's instances where it's like you think that you're hiring one property management company and they're like, hey, this is done. Check. The team is in place. I get to sleep at night. And then all of a sudden now you're like things that don't go the way that you think they would go, or you wouldn't handle it this way. And now you're almost like, okay, I'm managing this property manager instead of managing my property, which is scalable. And that's why we stuck with it, because we can go, okay, well, we can teach this property manager how to manage it the way we would manage it, because it sounds like they need to, but that we can continually add to that, right? We continually add to that, right? Like we can go, hey, next property come in. It's a little bit easier because the systems, the standard operating, the standing operating procedures are in place. And we just have to like be the manager, the same way you're running your business probably, but Bobby's like, these are the things I have to do on a regular basis. And then when we add a team member, it's like, what standard operating procedures need to go in place? Now we're actively being more of a manager in that case. And that's where we are now. It's like, but we had to create those systems along the way.
For sure. So we've talked about real estate as a way that you guys have explored in building some of your wealth. I also know we were chatting a little bit earlier about some of the other approaches to wealth accumulation and maybe some available insurance products that can help facilitate maybe the more sophisticated investor in accumulating wealth. Kyle, do you want to take a stab at maybe where some of your strategies would jump in and support people in that space?
Yeah, for sure. And it's interesting because all of our businesses have essentially evolved from solving our own problems and then turning them into businesses, right? So if you think about that from the math consulting space, we didn't come out of university thinking, one day I'd like to build a math consulting business. We solved or tried to solve our problem in the classroom. And then we were like, other people could benefit from this. And then we created online courses and, actual mentorship programs for district leaders. Well, the same's true here on this corporate wealth advisory side. So when we do corporate wealth management, basically what we're doing is we're just trying to help teach all of the learning that we did along the way. And really what it comes down to is that when you have, in particular, this can help on the personal side as well. And I'm sure you'd agree if, people are all their tax-free buckets, tax-free savings or RSPs, they're exploding and, they want to continue and then they want to start thinking legacy. Some of these can apply as well in that world. But on the corporate side, we run into some issues when we earn money in our corporation and then we have to figure out, do we take it out? Do I need to take it out for lifestyle? Or was that money going to get reinvested in something anyway? And the big question is like, what's better? Do I chop my investment at its legs and invest it outside of my company? A lot of people will chop it. So they take it out. They take, they take it as a salary or dividend, depending on how much it is. And then they lock it up.
Take a tax hit.
Yeah, take a tax hit. And then they throw it up in maybe the RSP and they go, we're good. Well, I'm like, well, you kind of took it from one jail. You put it in another jail, and then you still got to get it out of that jail later. So maybe we're in, maybe we're not. It really depends. So for guys like us with real estate, we're going, man, we've got real estate, we've got passive income inside of our corporation. We've got to think of a way that we can actually solve this problem because, when we take money, passive income tax being over 50% here in Ontario, I think our friends in Alberta, you guys are so lucky. It's only 46%, I think it is, right? Which is like, yay, we all, we at least get to keep half of our money. But ultimately, like that was an issue for me. And being a fact finder, I'm the type of person that I have to go down the rabbit hole to at least exhaust all my options. And I literally interviewed so many people around Canada to try to help me with different tools that might help us to mitigate not only like the tax issue, but then to also give us some strategies later for us to potentially get some of that benefit on the personal side without having to take that huge tax hit. And it really did lead me down, permanent life insurance was one of these tools that I'm just going to call it a tool. Some call it investment, but it's really a tool that when you put it inside of a company, when you buy it inside of a company, there's so many creative strategies you can do that are out of the box really helpful, but on the higher end or more advanced end can be massively helpful to allow you to essentially service your lifestyle without losing net worth because you're losing a bunch of money to taxation. So we do a lot with those types of strategies. So anything from the basic strategy, but then also onto, hey, using leverage and actually creating investment strategies, not tax avoidance strategies, in order for us to help more business owners, essentially fund their lifestyle while their net worth continues to grow at the same time.
Mm-hmm. And definitely a few highlights for me using insurance-related products as an investment strategy. One being that the growth inside an insurance policy is tax-free. So, I like to think of the insurance products that have an investment component almost like the corporate tax-free savings account.
We call it the unlimited TFSA.
Yeah. And again, thinking of that as only paying the business tax up front and then using that larger sort of pre-tax value to get it in there and growing faster from a wealth accumulation standpoint is such a great idea, whatever it is. But, life insurance products just seem to be able to grow tax-free along the way as well. The one maybe downside that I would say related to life insurance products from my perspective is, they are based on life insurance. And in some instances, some of those payouts only come when something bad happens.
That's why I put mine on John's life and not mine.
Exactly. Well, and truthfully, like, I know it's, we laugh at that, but, there's a lot of benefit to putting insurance policies like this type of vehicle on lives that are maybe a little less risky than our own, and getting access to lower insurance premiums while still building that portfolio. So lots of goodness in there. And it sounds like you guys have had an incredible journey of discovering some of these things. And the fact that you continue to share with other people is amazing. Let's talk about one thing and one area of sharing that I know we have a mutual interest, which is sharing financial wisdom with the next generation. I know for me, I was on breakfast television talking about this a couple of years ago. I work with an organization locally that, focuses on financial literacy for the youth, which is junior achievement. Would love to hear from you guys about the importance of teaching kids about wealth and financial management.
Sure. Yeah. I guess, that hits our hearts being, math teachers. And I think, I have three daughters, they're in their teenage years, and I actively think about their financial futures because I think coming from, even though my father was a math teacher, a very traditional math teacher. So like what Kyle said, he viewed himself as the dad in the Robert Kiyosaki's book,
Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Yeah. And it's like, my dad was that guy.
A little side note. So I know I mentioned to you guys I work with Tony Robbins. Well, his right-hand man was Keith Cunningham, who actually is described as the dad of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which is interesting. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah. So my dad was like actually that dad. And whereas I felt like I didn't have the education I needed to do the things we're doing now. Like it was like everything that I've learned along the way was like just not the norm, right? So I think it is extremely important to kind of relay these same ideas, these new ideas, so that our children have, a sense of ownership in how they want, and see their futures around money, and unfortunately, even though we were math teachers for so long, it's not taught in schools. Like we think it's taught in schools, but it's like
it's not.
And it makes sense. You've got an army of teachers who were like us and probably were educated like us, which means they all were like my dad, and they only thought, go for the pension, get your T4 job. Like don't think about how to manage your money outside of that realm. And we don't teach entrepreneurship really in schools. Like you could say there's a class on entrepreneurship, but you've also got a teacher who probably didn't live in that world, teaching that class, the ideas and the terms and what it looks like. But we have to, as parents and help our own children see that there's a different world around money, and we have to expose them to making choices, giving them the autonomy to kind of think about what is it that their goals are in life, and what are the tools that we could utilize to get to those goals. And I think that's the biggest takeaway I want my kids to have is this, like, I don't want them to kind of like always go, I have to do it this way. I want them to continually think about what are my options, and are those the best options, or are there other options? Like I need them to be those thinkers and deciders and like risk takers in a way. And the risk taking is not about like where my money goes, but my risk taking is about thinking that I don't have to do it the way someone tells me to do it. I have the ability, I have the understanding, I can find out the understanding, or I can learn. I'd rather them have that skill about where their money could go than say, this is the way to do it, or follow, someone's advice to do it. I want you to be a thinker instead of a follower.
Love that. Kyle, what's your take on this? I'm sure you have some too.
There's so many things there. John, you kind of gave me another thought, is like thinking beyond that and going, okay, absolutely. We need our obviously our younger generation to have that financial foundation. But one of the challenges is, of course, not only from an education standpoint and teachers, but also parents and others out there. The reality is that there's so many people, so many players in the financial industry in general that literally are giving advice to do things, and they have not yet done any of those things themselves, which is fundamentally a challenge because, they're probably doing their best. John and I actually recently recorded an episode on this where, a lot of people kind of play it as though like a financial person that works at the big bank or the insurance guy or the whoever guy is trying to intentionally mislead you. But I actually think it's something deeper. And I think it's that there's so many people out there that are doing this work without actually having a clear, holistic understanding of the big picture. So they might be giving you the best they've got, but that might not necessarily be the best for you. And it might not be the whole picture. So I think one of the pieces that's really important, so be it entrepreneurs who are listening and business owners, or if it's just someone who is in a T4 job, is that really getting educated and making sure that you have a nice, well-rounded understanding. You don't have to be an expert in all of it, is going to be really important for you to really know whether the person that you're working with is able to help you with what you truly need or truly want for your future. And, there's just not enough of that yet. So if we can work on that younger generation, then hopefully in time, we'll have more people in these roles that can kind of give more of a holistic picture. And I think, that's something that we try to offer the people that we do work with, is we try to give them a clear picture as how it works. And based on what you're saying, this may be a good fit, or maybe this isn't a good fit for you, and maybe you want to head down that path. So just making sure that it's clear, because there is no one size fits all, even though we all would rather that be the case, where it's like I could just do one meeting with the financial guy and that just make all my problems go away. It just doesn't work like that. So if you want a really good outcome, you're going to have to invest at least some time and potentially some effort with someone who you can trust along the way.
Absolutely. And before I ask how people could maybe learn more from your journey and where they can find you, I just want to share this. I get this meme every year, this time of year, being tax season. And every single year it's from the same person, and it says, "I'm so glad I spent 3 years learning about parallelograms now that I have to pay to get my taxes filed and I have no idea how to do it." And I always laugh at it every year. And, part of me is like, man, if there was just some little financial management of how to use a credit card, how to mortgages work, how budgets work, how taxes get filed, wouldn't we just be in a better system?
And to tell you the truth here, inside
You
made that meme, did you? Yeah.
I was going to say the answer to your taxes is in a parallelogram. You just don't know it yet.
You didn't go far enough, but this is the unfortunate part, right? Is if you came out of school and you did the advanced stream or you did the academic stream, you didn't get that education because I think the way it's structured is they think you're going to figure it out, like you've got the skills enough to like, you should be, you've learned how to learn a little bit. You should be able to figure that out if you want to. And and I'm not saying that this is the other way, but the other streams, specifically the workplace stream, which is a stream you didn't go through. It's not a stream that we went through. There are multiple classes that teach those things. And it's because they're preparing them to like, you're going to have to learn this because, that's what you need to know, and it's unfortunate that we don't put that, how to like manage your, like it's in the grade 9 curriculum right now. So the grade 9 curriculum has more financial planning. It has more budgeting and how to manage a budget. Like that's new in the last 2 years, and it's not a lot because the teacher's like, how do I do that? How do I teach that? Right? Like I haven't taught that before.
I don't know how to do that myself. Right.
And, but it's in say the grade 11 workplace class, the grade 12 workplace class, but not high level. It's just kind of a surface level understanding of how your taxes work. But yeah, it should be blended. Like we should have, you're right. It should be like part of, the work, the learning that we do. I think they just assume that you're going to figure it out if you really wanted it.
Well, and I think it gives an opportunity for people like us to go out and share that knowledge and inspire those who are looking to become aware and to know what's available and to help give them a little bit of guidance. So on that note, if anyone were looking to track you guys down, I know you have a podcast, but what's the best way for people to find you?
Awesome. Well, because you're listening to a podcast, I would say on the Canadian Wealth Secrets podcast. We also can be found on the web, canadianwealthsecrets.com. And we always say, if you listen to an episode of the podcast, we hope, and we'd like to say we promise that you'll get at least one wealth secret that you can pull and take with you and apply into your world. And of course, on our website, canadianwealthsecrets.com, you can book a chat with us to kind of go down the rabbit hole with you and give you something that you can take action on in your business, investments, or on your personal side.
Amazing. Well, guys, I got to say, it's been a pleasure to hang out with you guys multiple times today, which is great. But to share your experience, your story, some of the challenges facing, going from one career to moving into entrepreneurship, inspiring to so many, I'm sure. Appreciate your time. And we'll make sure that all your links are included in here as well. Anyone wanting to connect with Kyle and John, please do so. This has been the Wealthy Entrepreneur Podcast, guys. It's an absolute pleasure to hang out with you every single week. Make sure if you like this episode, give us a like, give us a follow. We've got another episode coming out next week. If you have someone that you know would benefit from the information that's been shared today, please share it with them, tag them, leave comments. What would you like to hear more of from us? We're happy to make sure that we deliver on that. Thank you so much for listening, guys. It's been a pleasure. This is a Wealthy Entrepreneur. Have a great day.
Thanks, Bob.
Thanks, Bob. Take care.